Life Stories brings you another heartfelt journey of love, resilience, and the power of second chances. In today's story, we follow Matthew, a devoted single father, and Hannah, a woman rebuilding her life after unimaginable hardships. Together, they navigate a world of betrayal, redemption, and hope, proving that family is not just about where you come from, but who stands by your side. This tale will inspire you to believe in the strength of the human spirit and the beauty of new beginnings. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Life Stories to begin today's heartwarming journey. Matthew had always been a man of precision and routine. Every morning, the alarm clock beside his bed would chime at exactly 6:30 a.m., signaling the start of another meticulously planned day. But this morning was different. He awoke to the gentle touch of his 7-year-old daughter, Emma, whose soft voice broke the silence. "Dad, it's time to get up. We've got a big day ahead. Remember? Come on. You can't be late for school." Matthew smiled, brushing her auburn hair from her face. She was his everything, his world, his light, and the only reason he managed to keep going through life's challenges. "All right, sweetheart," he said, stretching. "No cereal today. I made toast with your favorite jam, and don't worry about the office later. Kelly will pick you up after school." Emma pouted slightly, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Dad, I don't like your office. It's so boring. Can't I just stay home?" He chuckled, pulling her into a hug. "You're too young to stay home alone, Angel. And besides, you know your babysitter's still sick. Don't worry, I'll try to finish work early today. Deal?" Emma nodded reluctantly and padded off to get dressed. Watching her go, Matthew sighed. Life as a single father wasn't easy, especially when you were one of the most sought-after architects in Chicago. His days were consumed by meetings, blueprints, and negotiations, leaving little time for anything else. After Amanda had left him, life had taken on a robotic rhythm: wake up, work, pick up Emma, and repeat. There was no room for spontaneity, no time for emotions. The pain of Amanda's betrayal still lingered, though he rarely let it show. Amanda had been his college sweetheart. They met while studying architecture at Yale, where her ambition matched his own. Together, they dreamed of building an empire, and for a time, they succeeded. Their firm had been the pride of the city, blending Matthew's innovative designs with Amanda's keen eye for aesthetics. But as the business thrived, their personal lives faltered. Amanda began to feel neglected, especially after Emma was born. While Matthew buried himself in work to provide for their family, Amanda sought comfort elsewhere. Her betrayal came like a thunderstorm on a clear day, unexpected and devastating. She had fallen for Lucas, the firm's co-founder and Matthew's trusted partner. The divorce that followed was messy and public. Amanda left to start a new life with Lucas, taking a significant portion of their clients and reputation with her. But worst of all, she left Emma feeling abandoned, seeing her only sporadically and always with excuses about her busy schedule. For Matthew, the pain was compounded by the betrayal of a man he had once called a friend. Lucas not only stole Amanda but also manipulated contracts to claim assets that rightfully belonged to Matthew. Forced to start over, Matthew opened his own sustainable architecture firm. The path was grueling, but through hard work and the support of a few loyal clients, he began to rebuild. Yet the cost of his ambition was high. Long hours at the office meant missed bedtime stories and hurried dinners with Emma. He hated bringing her to work after school, knowing how much she disliked it. But he couldn't bear to leave her alone. Her safety was his priority, and after Amanda's departure, he promised himself he'd never let Emma feel neglected again. One afternoon, as Emma sat at his desk, doodling on a notepad, she looked up at him with her big, soulful eyes. "Dad, can I call Mom? I miss her." Matthew's heart sank. He never wanted to deny Emma the chance to connect with her mother, even if it hurt him. Of course, Sweetheart, he said gently. Give her a call. Maybe she's free this weekend. Emma dialed the number eagerly, but her expression quickly shifted to disappointment. Hi. Mom, she said, her voice hopeful. I was wondering if we could go for ice cream or maybe I could come over. I really miss you. On the other end, Amanda's voice was distant. Not today. Emma. I'm swamped. Maybe this weekend. Okay. I'll call you if I'm free. Emma hung up slowly, her lip trembling. Matthew knelt beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. Hey. How about this? Let's close the office early and go get the biggest ice cream sundae they've got. What do you say? Her face lit up instantly. With sprinkles. Sprinkles. Chocolate syrup. And strawberry sauce. The works, he promised. Moments like these were what Matthew lived for, seeing Emma smile. Hearing her laugh. But as they savored their ice cream later that evening, a pang of guilt gnawed at him. He wanted to give Emma the world, but he couldn't ignore the shadow of his own loneliness. Back at the office, as Emma dozed on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, Matthew stared at the city skyline. The bright lights seemed to mock him, a stark contrast to the darkness he felt inside. He wanted to be more for Emma, a father, a protector, and maybe one day, someone who could show her what a loving partnership looked like. He thought about his own childhood in a small Ohio town, where love and stability were scarce. His father was an alcoholic, and his mother, burdened by financial struggles, had little patience for his dreams. Architecture had been his escape, a way to build something beautiful out of the chaos. As he sipped his coffee, Matthew resolved to do better for Emma and for himself. He would balance his work and personal life, no matter how difficult it seemed. The next morning, as he dropped Emma off at school, she hugged him tightly. I love you. Dad, she whispered. I love you more, he replied, watching her skip toward the school gates. In that moment, Matthew felt a flicker of hope. Despite everything, he still had Emma. And with her, he knew he had a reason to keep going. The sting of betrayal doesn't fade easily. And for Matthew, it had left an indelible scar. Amanda had once been his partner in everything: love, business, and family. They had built something extraordinary together, but their success became the very thing that tore them apart. Matthew often replayed the events in his mind, wondering if he could have done something differently. He had poured his heart into their firm, working long hours to ensure its growth. Amanda, in contrast, began to feel invisible, craving the attention she felt Matthew no longer provided. She found that attention in Lucas, the firm's co-founder and someone Matthew had trusted implicitly. Lucas was charming, smooth-talking, and opportunistic, a dangerous combination. The betrayal wasn't immediate, it unfolded like a slow-burning fire, starting with subtle changes in Amanda's behavior. First, it was the late-night strategy meetings with Lucas. Then came the evasive answers when Matthew asked where she had been. But the final blow came when Matthew returned home one evening to find Amanda waiting for him, her bags packed. I can't do this anymore, Matthew, she said, her voice cold and detached. I'm leaving, with Lucas. The words hit him like a freight train. He wanted to scream, to argue, to demand answers. But all he could manage was a stunned, what about Emma? Amanda's response was chilling. I'll see her when I can. Lucas and we need to start fresh. And just like that, she was gone. The months that followed were a blur of pain and legal battles. Amanda and Lucas not only left him emotionally shattered but also financially vulnerable. Lucas had exploited gaps in their partnership agreement, transferring key assets and clients to a new firm he'd set up with Amanda. Matthew's reputation took a hit as whispers spread through the industry. People questioned his competence, his ability to manage a business, and even his judgment in choosing partners. For someone who had prided himself on integrity and professionalism, it was a bitter pill to swallow. But if there was one thing Matthew wouldn't allow, It was for Emma to suffer because of their betrayal. He threw himself into rebuilding. Not just for himself, but for her. He took a leap of faith and started his own architecture firm, focusing on sustainable design, a passion he had put on the back burner during his time with Amanda and Lucas. The work was grueling, often requiring him to work long hours to win over clients and re-establish his reputation. Yet, slowly but surely, he began to see results. His first breakthrough came from an old client who had admired Matthew's dedication and talent. Lucas might have stolen the firm, the client had said. But he didn't steal your creativity. Those words fueled Matthew's resolve. He expanded his network, reaching out to contacts in other cities, and even took on smaller projects that other firms overlooked. Each success, no matter how small, felt like a step toward reclaiming what he had lost. But rebuilding professionally didn't erase the personal challenges. Amanda's departure left Emma grappling with feelings of abandonment. At just 5 years old, she couldn't understand why her mother was suddenly absent from her life. "Is it my fault?" Emma had once asked, her eyes brimming with tears. Matthew's heart broke for her. He knelt down, holding her close. "No, sweetheart. None of this is your fault. Your mom loves you in her own way. But sometimes grown-ups make choices that don't make sense. I promise I'll always be here for you." Those words became his mantra. No matter how exhausted he was, no matter how overwhelming the workload became, Matthew made sure Emma knew she was his top priority. Still, the scars Amanda left ran deep. Emma would often sit by the window, waiting for her mother's promised visits that rarely came. When Amanda did show up, it was usually brief and impersonal. Her attention divided between Emma and her phone. One particular visit stood out in Matthew's memory. Amanda had come by for Emma's 6th birthday, bringing an extravagant gift, a dollhouse imported from Europe. Emma had been thrilled at first, but as the hours passed and Amanda made no effort to play with her or engage, the excitement faded. When Amanda left early, citing a meeting with Lucas, Emma had turned to Matthew and asked, "Why doesn't Mommy like spending time with me?" Matthew didn't have an answer. All he could do was hug her tightly and promise to make her birthday special. That night, as Emma slept, Matthew sat alone in the living room, staring at the dollhouse. It was a perfect metaphor for Amanda's approach to parenting, beautiful on the outside but hollow within. As the years went on, Matthew learned to navigate life as a single father. There were moments of doubt and exhaustion, but also moments of joy and pride. Emma's resilience amazed him. Despite everything, she remained kind, curious, and full of life. Matthew knew he couldn't change the past, but he could shape their future. He made a vow to himself: he would give Emma the love and stability she deserved, no matter the cost. And so, with each passing day, Matthew moved forward. The pain of Amanda's betrayal lingered, but it no longer defined him. His focus was on Emma and the life they were building together, a life rooted in love, trust, and the quiet determination to overcome whatever challenges lay ahead. It was a crisp autumn afternoon in Chicago when the unthinkable happened. Matthew had left Emma in his office with her homework while he stepped out for a quick meeting. When he returned, his heart dropped. Emma wasn't there. Frantically, he searched every corner of the office, calling her name, panic bubbling in his chest. Emma was usually careful, always asking permission before leaving, so her absence felt like a punch to his gut. Just as he was about to alert security, he spotted her through the large glass windows. Emma was across the street, walking toward a park. Relief turned to horror as Matthew saw her dart into the road. Oblivious to an oncoming car, he froze, the world slowing down around him. But before the worst could happen, a figure appeared out of nowhere. A woman, disheveled, with tangled hair and worn clothes, lunged forward, yanking Emma back onto the sidewalk just as the car screeched to a halt. By the time Matthew reached them, his relief was laced with anger and confusion. "Who are you? What are you doing with my daughter?" he demanded, his voice sharp with fear. Emma tugged on his sleeve, her small voice breaking through his panic. Dad, don't yell. She saved me. I didn't see the car. Please don't be mad at her. The woman, catching her breath, looked at Matthew with a calm but weary gaze. Your daughter's safe. That's all that matters, she said. Her voice was soft, yet it carried a quiet strength. Realizing his mistake, Matthew softened. I'm sorry. I was just scared. Thank you for saving her. I don't know how to repay you. She shook her head. I don't need money. I need a chance. A job. That would be the real help. Her words stopped Matthew in his tracks. She was unlike anyone he'd met, a mixture of vulnerability and determination. After a moment of thought, he turned to his secretary, Kelly, who had joined them outside. What do you think, Kelly? We've got a lot of new projects. Could we use an extra pair of hands? Kelly frowned, clearly skeptical. You're the boss. But I don't trust her. She could steal or worse. Look at her, she doesn't belong in an office. Matthew ignored the judgment in Kelly's tone. Everyone deserves a chance. Let's give her a trial period. Turning back to the woman, he asked, What's your name? Hannah, she replied simply. All right. Hannah. Matthew said. Be here tomorrow at 8 a.m. sharp. You'll work as an assistant for now. And Kelly will show you the ropes. Hannah nodded, her gratitude evident. Thank you. I won't let you down. Over the next few weeks, Hannah proved her worth. She was punctual, hardworking, and eager to learn. Though she was new to office work, her dedication was undeniable. With her first paycheck, she bought new clothes, had her hair cut, and found a small room to rent. Emma took an immediate liking to her, often chatting with Hannah after school. They bonded over simple things, Emma's school projects, favorite books, and even shared jokes. For Matthew, seeing Emma happy around Hannah was a welcome change. But not everyone was pleased. Kelly, who had worked for Matthew since his firm's inception, grew increasingly hostile. She'd harbored unspoken feelings for Matthew for years, and Hannah's growing presence in his life felt like a threat. One afternoon, Kelly set her plan into motion. She asked Hannah to fetch some documents from the filing cabinet, then waited until Hannah was out of sight before disarraying her desk. When Hannah returned, Kelly immediately raised her voice. What are you doing snooping around my files? These are confidential. Matthew, hearing the commotion, stepped out of his office. What's going on? Kelly pointed at Hannah, her face twisted in feigned outrage. I caught her going through sensitive documents. Who knows what she's planning to do with them? Hannah's face burned with shock and indignation. That's not true. I was getting the papers you asked for. I didn't touch anything else. Before Matthew could respond, a small voice cut through the tension. Dad, it's not her fault. Emma stepped forward, her eyes filled with determination. I saw Kelly mess with the desk before she called Hannah over. She wanted to blame her for something she didn't do. Matthew's gaze shifted to Kelly. Disappointment etched across his face. Is this true? Kelly stammered, unable to deny it. I just thought. That's enough. Matthew said firmly. Kelly, take some time off. We'll discuss your future here later. Turning to Hannah, he added, I'm sorry you had to go through that. I'll review the security footage to clear everything up. But for now, let's focus on the work at hand. Later that evening, Matthew sat in his office, reflecting on the day's events. Emma had stood up for Hannah without hesitation, and it struck him how much she trusted her. He couldn't ignore the growing bond between the two. That night, as he walked Hannah to the bus stop, she broke the silence. Thank you for believing me, Matthew. I've been judged my whole life because of where I've been. But you gave me a chance. That means everything. Matthew looked at her, seeing not just an employee but a resilient woman who had faced unimaginable hardships. You earned it, Hannah. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that everyone deserves a chance to start over. Hannah smiled. And for the first time in a long while, Matthew felt a flicker of something he hadn't allowed himself to feel since Amanda left, hope. Hannah's presence in Matthew's life brought an unexpected sense of comfort. Though it took time for him to understand why. There was something about her resilience. The quiet strength she carried. That resonated deeply with him. He saw glimpses of his own struggles in her. The battles fought behind closed doors. And the wounds that never fully healed. One evening, after a particularly long day, Matthew found himself sitting across from Hannah in the break room. Emma had already gone to bed on the office couch, her tiny form bundled in a blanket. While the quiet hum of the city filled the air, Hannah sipped from a mug of tea, her hands wrapped tightly around it as if seeking warmth. "You've been kind to me," she said softly, breaking the silence. Most people wouldn't have looked twice. Matthew leaned back in his chair. His curiosity piqued. "Everyone has a story, Hannah. I figured you might have one worth hearing." For a moment, she hesitated, as though weighing whether to open up. Then she began, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "I didn't grow up here," she said, her gaze distant. "My childhood was complicated. My dad was a heavy drinker, not the kind who gets loud or violent, but the kind who fades into the background, leaving you to fend for yourself. My mom was gone before I was old enough to remember her face." Matthew nodded silently, encouraging her to continue. "I did well in school, though. I loved numbers and problem-solving, anything that let me escape for a while. By the time I graduated, I was determined to build something better for myself. I enrolled in community college, worked odd jobs to get by, and eventually started a small business, a bakery." Her voice softened as she recounted those early days. "It was small, but it was mine. I worked hard, saving every penny to keep it running. Then I met Mark." Matthew noted the subtle shift in her expression, the way her eyes darkened at the mention of the name. "He was charming, supportive, or at least that's what I thought. We got married, and I truly believed we'd build a life together. But it didn't take long for things to fall apart. Mark, he wasn't who I thought he was. He had debts, gambling problems, and a knack for lying. One day, he cleaned out our accounts and disappeared." Hannah took a deep breath, her fingers tightening around the mug. "I lost everything, the bakery, my home, my sense of stability. For a while, I tried to fight back, to pick up the pieces, but the debts he left behind swallowed me whole. I ended up on the streets, and it felt like there was no way out." Matthew felt a pang of empathy, her story hitting closer to home than he expected. "That must have been incredibly difficult," he said. "But you didn't give up." "No," she agreed, a faint smile touching her lips. "I didn't. But it wasn't easy. I've spent the last few years just surviving, doing what I could to get by. When I saw Emma that day, running into the street, I don't know, something in me snapped. I couldn't let her get hurt." For a moment, they sat in silence, the weight of her story settling between them. Then Hannah turned the conversation around. "What about you? You've given me a second chance, but I get the feeling you've had your own struggles." Matthew exhaled deeply, the memories surfacing like ghosts. "My childhood wasn't much different from yours," he admitted. "My dad was an alcoholic, too. My mom worked herself to the bone trying to keep the house running. But there wasn't much left for me at the end of the day, no warmth, no encouragement." He paused, his gaze fixed on the floor. "I had to fight for everything. Architecture became my escape, my way of proving I could be more than the life I was born into. I worked my way through college, took on every odd job I could find, and eventually made it. Or at least, I thought I did." Hannah tilted her head, sensing there was more to the story. "My ex-wife, Amanda, and I built a firm together." Matthew continued. "It was successful, but the success came at a cost. She She left me for my business partner, Lucas. They took nearly everything: clients, assets, my reputation. But the worst part was watching her drift away from Emma. My daughter deserved so much more than what she got. Hannah's eyes softened with understanding. And you've been trying to give her that ever since? Matthew nodded. She's my reason for everything. I don't always get it right. But I'm trying. For the first time, Matthew saw the full extent of Hannah's compassion. She didn't pity him. Nor did she judge him. Instead, she listened. Truly listened. With an empathy that felt rare and genuine. That's why you gave me a chance, isn't it? She asked after a moment. Because you know what it's like to fight your way back. Maybe, he admitted. Or maybe it's because I saw something in you, a spark that refused to go out. No matter how hard life tried to extinguish it. Hannah's smile grew. Faint but heartfelt. Thank you, Matthew, for believing in me. As the clock ticked on, they sat together, their stories intertwining in a way neither had anticipated. For the first time in a long while, Matthew felt the walls around his heart begin to crack. And for Hannah, the possibility of rebuilding her life didn't seem so far out of reach anymore. The email came on an otherwise unremarkable Wednesday morning. Its subject line as stark and unyielding as a punch to the gut: "You're invited to Amanda and Lucas's wedding." Matthew stared at his screen, the words blurring as his emotions surged. His ex-wife was marrying his former business partner. The betrayal still lingered like a wound that refused to heal. But this was a new twist of the knife. The invitation felt more like a taunt than an olive branch. Why would Amanda want him there? Was it to parade her happily ever after in front of him? To remind him of what she'd taken? Before he could process the absurdity of the situation, his phone buzzed. The name on the screen sent his heart racing: Mr. Zhong. A Chinese investor Matthew had been trying to connect with for months. Matthew, the voice on the other end, began warmly. "I'll be in Chicago next week for the wedding. Amanda told me you might be there. Let's catch up, discuss that sustainability project we talked about." Matthew froze. The project in question could secure his firm's future. But the idea of facing Amanda and Lucas in the same room was unbearable. Yet he couldn't ignore the opportunity. "Of course," he replied, forcing his voice to sound steady. "I'll be there." After hanging up, Matthew sank into his chair, dread pooling in his chest. The thought of walking into that wedding alone, with Amanda and Lucas basking in the spotlight, was unbearable. It wasn't about appearances, it was about reclaiming some semblance of dignity. He needed someone by his side. Someone who could make Amanda second-guess her choices. And in his heart, he already knew who that someone was. The next day, Matthew approached Hannah in the office. She was sorting through a stack of project proposals, her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. "Hannah," he began, his tone hesitant. She looked up, her expression curious. "What's up?" "I need your help," he said, taking a deep breath. "I've been invited to my ex-wife's wedding. I'd like you to come with me, as my date." Hannah blinked, clearly taken aback. "You want me to pretend to be your girlfriend?" Matthew nodded, feeling a wave of embarrassment. "It's more than that. There's a potential investor attending. And this could be a huge opportunity for the firm. I can't face them alone. And I trust you." Hannah studied him for a moment, her brow furrowing in thought. "Matthew, I'd do anything to help you. But let's be honest, I don't fit into their world. Won't this backfire?" He shook his head. "Don't worry about that. You don't have to say much. Just being there will be enough. I'll handle the rest." After a long pause, Hannah nodded. "All right. I'll do it." In the days leading up to the wedding, Matthew made all the arrangements. He bought her an elegant navy gown that accentuated her natural grace. And they rehearsed a simple backstory for anyone curious about their relationship. The night of the wedding arrived with a chill in the air. The venue, a grand hotel ballroom in downtown Chicago, was a symphony of luxury and excess. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over the crowd, and the air buzzed with the chatter of the city's elite. Matthew and Hannah entered arm in arm, turning heads as they walked through the room. Hannah's transformation was stunning. Her hair styled in soft waves and her demeanor poised. "Stay close," Matthew whispered as they approached the bride and groom. Amanda's smile faltered when she saw them. Her gaze flickered between Matthew and Hannah. Curiosity mingled with something darker, jealousy. "Perhaps." "Matthew," Amanda said, her tone overly sweet. "I'm so glad you could make it." "Congratulations," Matthew replied smoothly, extending a gift box. "This is from me and my fiancé, Hannah." The word fiancé landed like a bomb, and Amanda's smile tightened. Hannah stepped forward, her tone warm but measured. "Congratulations, Amanda. Lucas. We wish you all the happiness in the world." As they walked away, Matthew couldn't help but notice the way Amanda's eyes followed them, a mixture of confusion and unease in her expression. The evening unfolded as expected. Matthew networked with the investor, securing a follow-up meeting to discuss their project. Hannah, meanwhile, played her role flawlessly, engaging in light conversation and drawing admiration from the other guests. But just when it seemed the night would end without incident, Amanda, visibly tipsy, grabbed the microphone. "I have something to say," she announced, her voice cutting through the music. "This woman, Hannah, she's not who she seems. She was homeless before Matthew hired her. She's no one special." The room fell silent, all eyes on Hannah. Matthew felt his stomach churn as whispers rippled through the crowd. Hannah, to her credit, didn't flinch. She rose from her chair and walked calmly to the microphone, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "Yes," she began, her voice steady. "I was homeless. I've struggled. But I'm not ashamed of where I came from. What matters is who I've chosen to become." Her words hung in the air, silencing even the harshest whispers. She turned to Amanda, her gaze unwavering. "I'm glad you left Matthew and Emma. They deserve someone who values them, someone who knows the meaning of loyalty and love." With that, Hannah walked off the stage, her head held high. Matthew followed her, his heart heavy with admiration and guilt. Outside, as they waited for the car, he turned to her. "I'm so sorry, Hannah. I never should have put you in that position." She shook her head. "Don't be. If anything, tonight reminded me of what I'm capable of. And maybe, just maybe, it reminded Amanda of what she lost." Matthew couldn't help but smile, despite the chaos of the evening. In Hannah, he saw not just an ally, but someone who had the strength to stand tall, no matter how hard life tried to knock her down. The evening after the wedding took a sudden, devastating turn. As Matthew and Hannah walked to the car, the sound of screeching tires pierced the night. Before either of them could react, a speeding truck appeared out of nowhere, its headlights blinding. The impact sent Hannah sprawling onto the pavement. Her body crumpled in a way that made Matthew's heart stop. "Hannah," he screamed, dropping to his knees beside her as chaos erupted around them. The truck driver rushed out, his face pale and hands trembling. "I didn't see her. She stepped out too fast," he stammered. But Matthew wasn't listening. His focus was entirely on Hannah, whose shallow breaths and pale complexion terrified him. "Stay with me," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Please, Hannah, stay with me." The ambulance arrived moments later, and the paramedics worked quickly to stabilize her. Matthew rode with her to the hospital, clutching her hand the entire way. Her fingers were cold, unresponsive, and the fear of losing her was like a weight crushing his chest. At the hospital, doctors whisked her into surgery, leaving Matthew to pace the waiting room, his mind racing with guilt and anguish. "This is my fault," he murmured to himself. "If I hadn't asked her to come to that wedding, this wouldn't have happened." Hours passed like years. Emma, who had been staying with a friend, arrived with the family who had brought her. her young face pale with worry. "Is Hannah going to be okay?" she asked, her voice trembling. Matthew knelt to her level, forcing a reassuring smile he didn't feel. "The doctors are doing everything they can. Sweetheart. She's strong. She'll fight through this." But even as he spoke the words, doubt gnawed at him. The doctor's initial prognosis was grim. The impact had caused severe trauma. And Hannah was in a coma. They couldn't predict if or when she might wake up. The days that followed were agonizing. Matthew and Emma visited Hannah every day, sitting by her bedside and talking to her as though she could hear them. Emma would read her stories or share the little details of her day, while Matthew would hold her hand, hoping for any sign of life. One afternoon, as Matthew sat alone with Hannah, the door to her room opened, and an unfamiliar man stepped inside. He was tall, with salt and pepper hair and a commanding presence. His eyes scanned the room before settling on Matthew. "Are you Matthew?" the man asked, his voice steady. "Yes." Matthew replied cautiously. "Who are you?" The man extended a hand. "I'm Robert Miller. I believe Hannah is my daughter." Matthew stared at him, stunned. "Your daughter? I don't understand. Hannah never mentioned." Robert interrupted gently. "She wouldn't have known. Let me explain." He took a seat, his expression pained but resolute. "Years ago, my wife and I struggled to have children. We eventually turned to surrogacy. The woman who carried our child, Cora, gave birth prematurely while we were away on a business trip. When we returned, the doctor handed us a baby girl, our daughter, Nora. We raised her as our own, never knowing the full story." Matthew's confusion deepened. "What does this have to do with Hannah?" Robert took a deep breath. "Recently, I hired a private investigator to look into the surrogacy arrangement. I'd always felt there were gaps in the story. And, well, we discovered that Cora had given birth to twins. She gave one baby to us, as agreed, but kept the other, Hannah, because her own son was gravely ill. She couldn't bear to part with both of them." The revelation hit Matthew like a freight train. "Hannah has a twin?" Robert nodded. "Nora, she passed away a few years ago. She had a rare illness. But when I saw Hannah at the wedding, I couldn't believe my eyes. She looks exactly like Nora." Matthew tried to process the information, his mind reeling. "Does Hannah know any of this?" "No," Robert admitted. "And I regret that deeply. But I want to make it right. I want to help her. To be there for her. Please. Let me do whatever it takes to support her recovery." Matthew hesitated. He didn't know whether to trust this man. But the sincerity in Robert's voice was undeniable. "Hannah means a lot to me," Matthew said finally. "If you can help her, then I won't stand in your way." From that moment, Robert became a constant presence at the hospital. He arranged for the best specialists, sparing no expense to ensure Hannah received top-notch care. Weeks passed, and though Hannah's condition remained critical, the unwavering support from Matthew, Emma, and Robert created a sense of hope. One evening, as Matthew sat by Hannah's bed, he felt her fingers twitch. At first, he thought he imagined it, but then her eyelids fluttered. "Hannah," he whispered, leaning closer. Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused but alive. A rush of emotion surged through him as he called for the doctors. "It's a miracle," one of them said. "Her recovery will take time, but she's made it through the hardest part." When Hannah finally spoke, her voice was faint but determined. "Matthew." "Emma." Matthew squeezed her hand, tears streaming down his face. "We're here. Hannah. We're not going anywhere." Robert stepped forward, his voice thick with emotion. "And neither am I." As Hannah's eyes met Robert's, something unspoken passed between them, a connection that transcended words. For the first time in years, Matthew felt like the pieces of his life were finally falling into place. Hannah's recovery was nothing short of a miracle. But the journey ahead was daunting. In the weeks that followed, She had to relearn the simplest of tasks: speaking, walking, even holding a pen. Yet, she approached each challenge with the same quiet resilience that had always defined her. Matthew and Emma never left her side. Emma, especially, took on the role of cheerleader, drawing pictures to decorate Hannah's hospital room and reading her stories. It was Emma's presence that often brought the brightest smiles to Hannah's face, her small gestures of love providing the motivation to keep pushing forward. Robert, too, remained a constant. His revelations about Hannah's past had added a layer of complexity to her life. But his efforts to support her recovery were genuine. He visited daily, bringing flowers, books, and stories about the sister Hannah had never known. While she was still processing the truth about her parentage, Hannah found comfort in Robert's unwavering kindness. One sunny afternoon, as Hannah practiced walking in the hospital's rehabilitation center, Robert stood beside her, watching with a mix of pride and guilt. "I never should have let so much time pass," he said softly. Hannah paused, leaning on her walker. "You didn't know, Robert. None of us did. What matters is that you're here now." Her words carried no bitterness, only acceptance. For Matthew, who had overheard the exchange, it was yet another example of Hannah's remarkable ability to forgive. As Hannah's strength grew, so did her bond with Matthew and Emma. By the time she was ready to leave the hospital, there was no question about where she would go. "Home," Emma declared with a grin, clutching Hannah's hand. "Our home." And so, Hannah moved into the house that had once felt so empty. With her presence, it transformed into a true home, a place filled with laughter, warmth, and love. Hannah quickly became a maternal figure for Emma, helping her with school projects, baking cookies together, and sharing stories about perseverance and hope. For Matthew, the change was transformative. Watching Hannah and Emma together, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. He realized how much he valued Hannah not just for her strength and kindness, but for the way she brought joy and stability to their lives. But as their family grew closer, Amanda's life was unraveling. After the disastrous wedding, Amanda's marriage to Lucas began to crumble. Lucas, once the charming and confident businessman, revealed his true colors, a man driven by greed and selfishness. The glamorous life Amanda had envisioned with him was replaced by arguments, financial strain, and growing mistrust. It didn't take long for Amanda to realize her mistake. Lucas was no Matthew. He lacked integrity, loyalty, and the ability to truly love. Worse, his manipulative tendencies extended to their relationship, leaving Amanda feeling isolated and betrayed. One evening, during a particularly heated argument, Lucas finally snapped. "You're just as toxic as you accused Matthew of being," he spat. "Look at what you've done," humiliated him. "Abandoned your own daughter. And now you expect me to clean up your mess. I'm done." With those words, Lucas packed his belongings and left, slamming the door on the life they had built, or rather, destroyed together. For Amanda, the silence that followed was deafening. Alone in the luxury apartment she could no longer afford, she began to drink heavily, her thoughts consumed by regret. The memories of her life with Matthew haunted her, the love they had shared, the family they had built, and the stability she had so carelessly thrown away. Desperation drove her to attempt reconciliation. She began showing up unannounced at Matthew's office, leaving voicemails filled with tearful apologies and pleas for a second chance. "Matthew, I made a mistake," one voicemail began, her voice slurred. "I know I hurt you, but we can fix this. I want us to be a family again, for Emma's sake." Matthew listened to the messages with a mix of anger and pity. Amanda's words, once sharp and calculating, now carried a hollow ring. One afternoon, as he worked in his office, Amanda appeared in the doorway, disheveled and desperate. "Please, Matthew," she begged. "Just hear me out." He stood, his expression firm. "Amanda, We've been over this. There's no going back. What you did, it broke something that can't be repaired. Emma and I have moved on. You should, too. Her eyes filled with tears. But Matthew didn't waver. For the first time. He felt no guilt. No obligation to soften the truth. As Amanda stumbled out of the office, she caught sight of Hannah helping Emma with her homework in the reception area. The sight of them together, the quiet harmony they exuded, filled Amanda with jealousy and rage. But deep down, she knew the truth. Hannah had become everything Amanda could never be: a loving partner, a devoted mother figure, and someone who genuinely cared for Matthew and Emma without ulterior motives. In the weeks that followed, Amanda's downward spiral accelerated. She continued to drink, her resentment toward Hannah festering. One night, in a fit of anger and intoxication, she drove recklessly through the streets of Chicago, her thoughts consumed by bitterness. Fate, however, intervened. Amanda lost control of her car, crashing into a tree near Matthew's neighborhood. The sound of the collision jolted Matthew, Hannah, and Emma from their cozy evening at home. They rushed outside to find Amanda injured but alive, her once polished appearance now a shadow of its former self. As paramedics tended to her, Amanda locked eyes with Matthew, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "For everything." Amanda survived the accident but suffered significant injuries. Her once charismatic presence was replaced by a quiet, broken shell of her former self. For Matthew and Emma, it marked the end of a tumultuous chapter. They visited Amanda in the hospital, not out of obligation, but out of compassion. Emma, in particular, showed remarkable grace, offering her mother forgiveness even when it wasn't asked for. As Amanda recovered, she faded from their lives, retreating to a quieter existence far from the chaos she had created. For Matthew, Hannah, and Emma, life moved forward, stronger and brighter than ever before. The days that followed Amanda's departure from their lives were filled with quiet relief and a sense of new beginnings. The home Matthew had once struggled to fill with warmth now felt complete. With Hannah and Emma by his side, it wasn't just a house, it was a sanctuary, a place where love and laughter reigned. Hannah's presence brought a unique harmony to their lives. Emma, who had once carried the weight of her mother's neglect, now radiated joy. The bond she shared with Hannah deepened, their interactions blending effortlessly from playfulness to heartfelt conversations. Hannah had a way of listening that made Emma feel heard, truly heard, in a way Amanda never had. One Saturday morning, the three of them worked together in the kitchen, preparing a breakfast feast of pancakes, scrambled eggs, and fresh fruit. Emma giggled as Hannah playfully smeared a dab of whipped cream on her nose. Matthew, flipping pancakes at the stove, turned to see the two of them laughing, their connection so natural it felt as if it had always been there. "All right. You too," Matthew said with mock seriousness. "If this kitchen turns into a food fight, I'm the one who's cleaning up." Hannah grinned, wiping the cream from Emma's nose. "Don't worry, Chef Dad. We'll keep it under control." Moments like these reminded Matthew how far they'd come. The shadows of betrayal and loss no longer loomed as they once did. Instead, their family had found a way to thrive, piecing together a new life filled with love and trust. Even as their family grew closer, Hannah continued to embrace her newfound identity. The revelations about her biological father, Robert, had been overwhelming at first, but she approached the situation with her characteristic grace. Robert, ever eager to connect with his daughter, introduced her to his world, a life of luxury and legacy she had never imagined. One sunny afternoon, Hannah and Matthew visited Robert's estate for the first time. The sprawling property was breathtaking, with manicured gardens, marble fountains, and a grand mansion that seemed to stretch endlessly. For Hannah, who had once slept on park benches and dreamed of stability, it was a surreal experience. "Do you feel like you belong here?" Matthew asked gently as they strolled through the gardens. Hannah hesitated, her eyes scanning the grandeur around her. I don't know if I belong, but I know I'm welcome. That's more than I ever thought I'd have. Robert, for his part, respected Hannah's boundaries. He never pushed her to embrace a life she wasn't ready for but made it clear that his door and his heart were always open. I'm proud of you, Robert told her one evening. Not because of where you came from, but because of who you've chosen to be. You've shown strength that most people can't even imagine. Hannah's voice was soft but firm as she replied, I'm proud of the life I've built, too. But I wouldn't have done it without Matthew and Emma. Robert smiled knowingly. It seems you've found a family as strong as you are. Back at home, the bond between Matthew and Hannah continued to grow. Their late-night conversations became a cornerstone of their relationship, revealing a depth of understanding and affection that neither had dared to hope for before. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching Emma play in the yard, Matthew finally spoke the words he had been holding onto for weeks. Hannah, I don't know what my life would look like without you in it. You've not only helped me heal, but you've also brought Emma and me a kind of happiness I didn't think was possible. Hannah looked at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. You and Emma have given me a home, a real home, for the first time in my life. I've always been afraid of trusting someone. But with you, I don't have that fear anymore. The moment stretched between them, warm and unspoken, until Matthew reached for her hand. I want this to be forever, he said. For us. For Emma. Will you stay? Not just as part of our lives, but as part of our family. Hannah's response was a tearful nod, her smile bright and full of hope. Yes, Matthew. Nothing would make me happier. From that day forward, their lives intertwined in a way that felt inevitable, as if fate had guided them to one another. Emma, overjoyed at the news, quickly took to calling Hannah Mom, a title that made Hannah's heart swell with gratitude and love. But life wasn't without its challenges. News of their growing family eventually reached Amanda, whose own life had taken a darker turn. Though she attempted to re-enter their lives, her efforts were rebuffed with firm kindness. Amanda, Matthew had said during one of their last conversations, we've forgiven you for the past. But that doesn't mean we can go back. Emma deserves stability, and she has that now with Hannah and me. Amanda's expression had been a mixture of regret and resignation. I hope you can give her the kind of life I never could. And that's exactly what Matthew and Hannah did. Together, they built a life defined not by wealth or success but by love, trust, and a shared commitment to family. Their home became a sanctuary where Emma could thrive, her laughter echoing through the halls like music. As time passed, their family grew stronger, bound by the trials they had overcome and the joy they had discovered in one another. For Matthew and Hannah, it wasn't about erasing the past, it was about creating a future that honored the lessons they had learned and the love they now shared. In the end, they weren't just a family, they were a testament to resilience. A living proof that even in the face of heartbreak and betrayal, it was possible to find happiness again. And for the first time in years, Matthew, Hannah, and Emma knew what it truly meant to be home. In the end, Matthew, Hannah, and Emma created a life that was a true testament to resilience and love. Their journey had not been easy, but it was through their trials that they discovered what truly mattered: family, trust, and the courage to embrace a second chance. Hannah found her place not just as a mother figure to Emma but as Matthew's partner in every sense of the word. Together, they rebuilt a home that was filled with laughter, warmth, and unwavering support. Emma thrived in this environment, growing into a bright and joyful child who knew she was deeply loved. As for Matthew, he finally found peace. The scars of betrayal no longer defined him, instead, they became reminders of how far he had come. With Hannah by his side and Emma's happiness as his guiding light, he knew they had built something extraordinary. Their story proves that even when life takes unexpected turns, there is always hope for a brighter future. If you found this story touching, don't forget to like and subscribe to Life Stories for more heartfelt tales of love, resilience, and hope. Stay tuned for the next inspiring journey.